Hello, welcome to Starving Artist with LJ Jones. I'm LJ Jones, and this is episode 1 of Starving Artist, and I cannot be more excited. I have an amazing show lined up today with an amazing guest, but before I get into telling you who that is, let me just tell you a little bit about this podcast. So Starving Artist is a podcast where I will be sitting down with creative individuals, and we'll be discussing their journey. We'll talk about their past, we'll talk about their present, and maybe even their future. And what we're going to zero in on is their come up, because the goal of this podcast is to inspire and to motivate everybody out there to get up, go out there and get it. Whatever their dream may be, whatever their passion may be, I want to help motivate you to just stay confident and stay passionate. So that's the goal of this. And without further ado, man, let me tell you who the guest is. The number one first guest on Starving Artist is, I'll say he's a broadcast legend. He's one of my favorite broadcasters, if not my favorite broadcaster. He is the host of the Afternoon Drive show on 102.5 The Bone, Drew Garabo. His show's Drew Garabo Live. And let me tell you, man, I've been listening to Drew Garabo since I was in high school. I think I was 10th grade when I discovered his show. And I've been listening pretty much every day since. If I miss the live broadcast, I listen to the replay. Drew is not only is he an incredible host, but he's also an incredible human being. So, he graced us with his presence and with his iconic voice, as I say so in the episode. We talk about his intro into radio. We talk about his trajectory from intern to host. And man, we talk about so many things. We talk about the different iterations of his show. We kind of go on some tangents here. We talk about John Travolta. We talk about 70s television. We talk about a lot of things, and we have a lot of fun. So my hope right now is that you have a lot of fun listening. And, man, I hope that you leave this podcast inspired and motivated. Without further ado, Drew Garabo.
Everybody's aiming for the top, trying to make it before all your time is up. We stay up on the grind all day non-stop.
I can't even lie to you, man. I'm a little nervous right now.
Well, I know how you feel, because 2 weeks ago I did I sat in on the LL Cool J Beastie Boys town hall that they did on Sirius, and it was my first Zoom experience. And it was kind of weird because I didn't know if they're going to ask me to ask a question, and I didn't want to come off like the dildos that they were choosing. You know what I mean? They were picking some booty ass questions, and I was like, oh my God, am I going to choke if they pick me? And fortunately, they didn't pick me. Thank God.
Well, you talked to LL Cool J, so he knows who you are.
Well, I don't make that ever. LL Cool J talks to a lot of people, LJ. So I would hope he would have somewhat of a unique name. I think I've interviewed him like 2 or 3 times, and I hope he would, but you never know.
Well, so for the audience, I'm sure everybody recognizes your iconic voice. But if you don't, that is Drew Garabo of Drew Garabo Live on 102.5 The Bone. Welcome to Starving Artist.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me. It's an honor.
Absolutely. Before I get into it, I just want to tell you how amazing your show is.
Oh, go ahead.
I started listening to your show when I was in 10th grade ish. I think it was towards the end of you being middays before you went to Afternoon Drive, and listen to your show every day to this day. Like, even if I'm working or something and I miss it, I got the replay going. I love your show.
Thanks, man.
And honestly, I'm an actor. And so I wrote and directed a movie just finished about a year ago. And I got a lot of my creative inspiration from listening to your show. If I found myself in writer's block or just, kind of like, even when editing the movie, like, I'd have your show, I'd be listening to your show, and it would just help me kind of get through those moments. So thanks, your show has been incredible in my life. So thank you.
Dude, thank you. That means everything, man. When the greatest compliment that someone can pay me is to tell me that our show serves a purpose for them. You know what I mean? Like, we we sit in that room and talk to each other, and we try to make a difference, and we try to make traffic better when there was traffic. Remember traffic?
Oh yeah, almost forgot.
But like to inspire creative juices, that's everything, because I was a kid who got creativity from the radio as well. And you know, if I was writing or if I was working on something, to hear a voice like turning nothing into something, I know how that feels to inspire. So man, thank you. Like that means a lot.
Absolutely. So I mean, with that being said, I always start these things off asking, where are you from? And what was that aha moment for you when you realized that radio was what you wanted to do?
Man, I spent the first 2 years of my life in New York. My parents met in New York City. My dad was going through medical school, and my mom was in nursing school. And so they met and then moved to Massachusetts when I was 2. My sister was born, and then we lived there until 78. There was a blizzard in 78 that pushed us down to Orlando, Florida. And I spent from, my dad put in for a transfer, and they were like Phoenix, Arizona or Orlando, Florida. And we had already been to Disney a couple of times, so we choose there. And from 78 until 2011, I lived in Orlando, and that's, you know, where I cut my radio teeth. And as far as an aha moment, and then I moved to Tampa St. Pete in 2011 to complete that. But my aha moment should have occurred so much earlier in my life, man. I should have paid closer attention to what I was passionate about. I would, starting when I was like 6 years old, I would interview myself on a tape recorder that my granny in Largo had. We'd spend boring ass summers in a mobile home park, Oak Crest Mobile Home Park on Ulmerton in Largo, with nothing to do, literally nothing. So I'd interview myself as Muhammad Ali and Howard Cosell. And then through the years, I always loved radio. I used to write down Casey Kasem's top 40 every week and compare how songs had fallen and risen on the charts. And then I never, ever thought that radio could be a career path. I didn't listen to my mom, who told me, find something you love to do, and, you know, and then the money will follow. And then one day I was driving home from my girlfriend's house at UCF. I used to listen to Rollins College radio station. They played really good indie rock. And I heard them make an announcement for DJs that they needed to volunteer while the students were from Rollins were back at home for the summer. And I was like, that sounds like it might be fun. What the fuck, you know? And they had me come down and read news into a tape recorder to make sure I wasn't an idiot. And I guess I fooled them into thinking I was an idiot, or I could just pronounce like, Shevardnadze and Khrushchev, or, you know, Gorbachev or whatever.
Yeah.
And so they gave me a show. They said, go in there Thursday morning, you and this dude, Bill, you're going to be switching half hours. You'll do 8 to 11. You'll do 8 to 8:30. He'll do 8:30 to 9, blah, blah, blah. So I go in there, and honestly, man, it's so cliche, but like from that very first time that I sat at a board and I played music and got to use my voice, that was really like, it was like heroin, man. It's except like, instead of chasing the dragon, where your hit is never as good as the first, I think radio is the exact opposite. If you're doing it right, I think every single time you do it, you're trying to improve upon the time before. And it's like that for me to this day. So probably 92 or so. That was my aha moment at Rollins College, the voice of Rollins College, the best in basement radio, WPRK 91.5. Shout out.
That's amazing. You know, I would love to hear those cassette tapes from when you were 6.
No, you
wouldn't. I'd love to hear those.
It's funny. It's a very sore subject that I won't go into too much detail. Okay. But the worst family strife I've ever been into is over those tapes, because they do exist. But you know, how do I put this the right way? My sister and I kind of disagree on whether I should play them on the radio or not. She kind of thinks that I would make fun of her a little bit. And her voice is adorable. Like, she's got this, we had Boston accents hardcore because we lived in Framingham. So we'd talk about like Magic Kingdom and shit. And I was like, there's a blue hippopotamus over there. Like, it was really, really funny. And then my impressions were just as good then as they are now. So you can imagine what my Howard Cosell and Muhammad Ali sounded like.
That's an amazing story. So like coming from your internship there, or your volunteer, whatever it was. What was your trajectory from there? Because you stayed in Orlando, did radio for a while.
Yeah. So I was volunteering at Rollins and still not thinking about making a living doing it, just thinking how much fun it was. And that, every semester they'd tell me, hey, sorry, the kids are coming back to college. We don't know if we'll have a spot for you. And I would be like, cool, any spot you have, I don't care when it is, I'll take it. 2 a.m, 7 night, whatever. And so every semester they'd find something for me, whether it was midnight to 3 or whatever, and I'd fill in all the time. And, I was working at the time at the Holiday, different restaurant jobs. I then became a restaurant manager and then got the restaurant job of a lifetime for my age at the time, in my 20s. I was the assistant to the food and beverage director at the Holiday Inn by the Orlando airport. And that was, at the time, my trajectory. You know what I mean? Like, I thought that's where it was going to take me. I'm wearing a suit. I'm writing schedules. I'm running room service and bar and restaurant and all this shit. And then radio came along, and some dude, when I'm at Rollins, calls me and says, hey, have you ever thought about being paid to be on the radio? And I'm like, no, not really. And he said, well, I'm starting to play alternative music on this talk station, Real Radio 104.1. And I'm like, that's my favorite station in the world. I worship Jim Phillips. I have for years. And so he was like, all right, well, and I didn't believe him. I thought it was one of my friends fucking with me. So I put him through all these quizzes. I'm just like asking him everything about the station. He's getting them right. And he's like, dude, are you trying to talk me out of giving you a job? I'm like, make sure you're not fucking with me, man. And so, I started playing music on the weekends there, and then met Ed Till, the midday Madman talk show host, in February of 1995. That was my first full-time gig. And from there, worked at that station until 2005, got my ass fired, took a morning show on O-Rock 105.9 across town after I served out a 3-month bullshit non-compete, which they make you do in radio. It's like, we don't want you, but we also don't want you to be able to make any money for other stations. Like, thank you.
Because they'll lose all the listeners, because the listeners love you.
Right. And then why are you getting rid of me? Although to be perfectly frank, I definitely deserve to be fired from Real Radio. Like looking back on it now, definitely, they were definitely well within their rights. In fact, it was the right move to fire me. But at the time, you can't see that. You're blind to it. You're like, fuck this place, man. So then I would go do mornings at O-Rock 105.9 and did that for 3 years till 2008. And then, they flipped the format, which is the worst thing in radio because they fire everybody. They have to re-image and all that shit. So they're like, well, hope you guys had fun. 12 of us in a conference room. Paul and HR will take your keys from you, and we've got a severance for you, and best of luck in your future. And so that was January of 2008. And I was done, dude. I'm like, I'm never going to work in radio again. You don't get another chance. Like, if you've been out for a while, didn't even try to get another job in radio, to be honest with you, because I figured if it had broken my heart like that, I had given so much to it, only to have it taken away from a corporate decision. I don't want to put myself through that. I don't want to be the type of guy who moves his family across the country for a radio gig. And so I went to work for the Orlando Magic selling season tickets. After exploring some options in the food service industry, I waited tables because I got to make money, dude. Like, literally, I got fired on a Friday morning. By Saturday night, I was waiting tables at a restaurant in town because there's no room. You got a young kid and you got to get that cheddar. And so I then decided to try selling season tickets for Orlando Magic. I had some friends in the organization, and I thought that was going to be the rest of my life, a sales guy. And 2 years in, it killed me. Like, literally the rejection. It's not made for a sensitive pussy like me. And so, you make 100 outbound phone calls every day. 98 of them are no. And the other 2 are maybes who know they're not going to buy, but they want to feel, wanted. So they fuck with you for a while and clown you. And then, I was at a dead end, and I had no idea what was going to happen. And then literally a miracle happened. If I were a religious person, which I'm not at all, I would say that was a miracle or divine intervention or whatever. And I'm still not sure what it was, other than the universe looking out for me and delivering me back, hopefully where I belong, which is back in radio. I came to Tampa in July 5th of 2011 was my first day. So that's my trajectory. Long answer. Sorry, LJ.
No, it's perfect. That is, just how, like, you know, like you said, miraculous that was, because you weren't seeking anything out. It just kind of fell in your lap. And one of the things that not only that I love about your show, but that I love about you as a person is how grateful you are every day to be in radio. It's something you talk about often. It's something I've seen you tweet about often, and it's refreshing to see somebody so open about how grateful and happy they are to be doing what they do, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah, you get that perspective only from losing it.
Mm-hmm.
I was entitled in my early days. I had success pretty early, and it definitely went to my head, and I wasn't prepared to be a leader. I wasn't prepared to be anything even remotely considering open-minded. I thought I knew. You couldn't tell me shit. I didn't get any radio training. I learned it all myself, so you couldn't tell me shit about radio. And then being forced to be out of it for a while, thinking you're never going to have it back again. Literally every day when I scan myself in, I can't fucking believe that I'm back on the radio and that somebody is paying me. Like, when I remember being with the Magic and going to games and being in a suit and having to talk to clients, and then having somebody recognize me from the radio and then being like, "Oh man, you should be back on the radio." And I know they meant well. It's like a super nice thing to say, but you might as well just stab me in the knife, the gut with a knife by saying that, because I'm like, yeah, I really should be, shouldn't I? And then, since then, man, like I approach this with such gratitude and such perspective. And guys who have never lost their radio gigs and been forced to be out of it for a while, I don't think they have that. Like, I truly think you take so much for granted. You can't help it if you haven't lost it for a while. And
you don't know what you have till you lose it.
Dude, exactly. And honestly, if I had not been out of radio those 3 years, I would be a completely different person right now, a garbage person. I'd be one of those, radio people who treat everybody around them like shit. And there are certainly those in our industry, man. And I understand it, because you get used to being told you're king shit and that nobody can tell you anything, and people kissing your ass all the time. Of course it's going to go to your head. So I'll never be like that again, because I know what it's like to have to work a job and hump it. And it fucking sucks, man. I don't ever want to have to do that again.
When you had mentioned people coming up to you at games and say, "Oh, you should be on the radio," I identify with that, because I work a day job at a local hospital here in Pasco County with psych patients specifically. You can imagine the stories. All day I have coworkers coming up to me and saying, "Oh, why don't you act more? Like, you should do more work." I would fucking love to.
Right.
I audition 10 times a week and get nothing. You're lucky. Like, I think Danny DeVito said it. You're lucky if you get one audition, if you book one job out of 100 auditions. Yeah, and that's just the truth.
It is.
So when you found yourself sitting there working for the Magic after being in radio for several years, were you sad, or were you excited for? I mean, obviously you love radio, but were you kind of excited for something new at that time?
Yeah, honestly, like I really was excited for something new, because that radio wasn't an option for me. I felt like it was my calling, but at the same time, it had just ripped every ounce of my heart and soul. And so I was like, I just can't do it. So I actually called a friend of mine. I'd consider him a mentor now. At the time, he had a business relationship with him, because I've been going to Magic games for a while, and he was a vice president there. And so I called him up, and he was like, "Well, I got to be honest with you. I don't have any broadcasting positions." I'm like, "I'm not looking for a broadcasting position, man. Like, I don't want to do that again." And he said, "Well, have you ever considered ticket sales?" And I was like, "Well, like the dude who sits in the window and like sells you your tickets?" He goes, No. You'd be like prospecting companies and, and selling ticket packages and all that stuff. I'm like, all right, something new. I like new shit. You know what I mean? Like, I'll try, I'd try lots of stuff. I used to work retail record stores, restaurants, everything. So yeah, I've never done it before. It's a new skill I could try to acquire. And initially it was very invigorating, because I was much older than the entry-level kids that were ticket sales reps. And it's funny, because actually today I posted on Facebook, it's a 12-year Facebook anniversary of this kid that I met the first day of training, and we became friends immediately. This most unlikely of friends. He's like the 6'5" Texan, blonde hair, big ass, loud, booming voice.
Yeah.
and I'm me. And so, I meet this dude my first day of training, and he's in my training class, and we're both ticket sales reps. And he gave me such a cool perspective on that job because it was his first one out of college, and that's his first real world experience. And there he is working with some 40-year-old, you know, and it was good for him too. And so because of that, you know, that lifestyle was pretty damn cool. All the guys my age were like these senior sales guys, the sharks who would, like, you know, make all the money and shit. And I enjoyed it initially. Yeah, I did enjoy the challenge, but eventually you're either cut out to be a salesperson or you're not. And that's a skill set that I admire and respect because I got to see it firsthand. But I also know that I definitely do not have. I love the building relationships part of it.
Right.
I hate the closing of the transaction part of it. That's when, because a relationship to me is authentic. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not looking for anything from you if we have an authentic relationship. But with sales, it's a fake relationship because I'm like, oh, we got this thing, we got this in common. And then you make the presumptive close. So, you know, how many tickets can I put you down for? And so that part of it, I didn't care for at all. And then the rejection, the overwhelming rejection is what found me at a point where I was just like, ugh. So then I started doing a podcast before podcasts were podcasts.
Right.
And that felt so weird. It felt like I was faking my way back into radio. Like my friends were still on the radio and shit. And I was talking to a computer with a buddy of mine in his bedroom with some mics that he had built into his walls. And bless him for doing it. I love you, Ryan. Like you kept the dream barely alive for me, but it felt so weird. And then actually, I hate to give him credit because he's such a fucking scumbag, but Bubba put me on it. He put me on his radio IO. Spice actually set the whole thing up. I didn't know the other guy at all, but I knew Spice and I knew he was a good dude. I love that guy to this day. And he called me and said, "Hey, we're putting together this radio thing on the internet. Would you want to do a show twice a month?" I was like, all right. I mean, that sounds interesting. He's like, "We can't pay you anything." I'm like, all right. But I mean, you know, kind of be weird, like being on the radio. Right. And so 2 Tuesdays a month, I'd make the drive from Orlando to Tampa and I'd go do this radio IO thing. And it was cool. Like I got to be honest with you, the fans were super supportive and super cool. And that kind of stoked a little fire in me to like start doing it again. You know what I mean? Like it was really, it reminded me of what it was like. And then around that time is when Shark, the PD from 97X, needed somebody to host mornings, and so he reached out to me, which was great.
What was that first day back full time in radio? What was that day like for you? Like when you swiped your badge walking in, what was that feeling?
Man, I remember getting my ID. This is a funny story. This is so radio. Like this encapsulates, for anyone who doesn't work in radio or doesn't know what it's all about, this is what radio is all about. So my first day back, they give me my ID. It's July 3rd, Monday. And they're flipping a format. They're changing 101.5, The Point, which was like 80s and shit. By the way, Jared from Subway's favorite radio station. He used to make in-studio visits, and that was his favorite radio station. Before we found out he was a fucking creep, he was he was a great guy. Just like those 4-inch subs, a little too much, if you know what I mean. Sorry, that's the first time I've made that joke. I really hope it's the last too. That was awful. So I'm going up to see the launch of Hot 101.5, like to see what that's all about. And I walk in the building and I go in the elevator and this lady's there named Corey Dillon. And she hates me now. And I haven't been too nice to her. We used to do daytime together, but this was my first interaction with her. And so she's crying. Like we're going up in the elevator together and she's crying. And I'm like, oh man. And she goes, "Please tell me everything's going to be okay." And I was like, everything's gonna be fine. I'm Drew. She's like, "I'm Corey Dillon." I go, "What station you work for?" And she's like, 101.5 The Point. And like I knew they were changing that to Hot, and I was just like, oh fuck. So literally I'm going to the launch party and she's going to find out that the format has flipped, which is what I literally just went through 3 years ago, which ripped my heart out. And I felt so bad for her. I'm just like, oh my God, like literally one door closes and another one opens, and there's the yin and the yang of it. So that was my first day back, and it was just such a brutal reminder. Yet at the same time, I felt survivor's guilt that here I am watching the launch and seeing all these people and meeting them. And so then we had July 4th off, and then the next morning we started our morning show at 5:30. I think I was probably in the building by like 2 or 2:30 because I was just I couldn't wait to get to work. Yeah, I'm like, come in. So that moment, that dead ass night, I probably set 6 different alarms and needed none of them. And then you had to scan to get in the building itself because it was after hours. And I remember like swiping that and then beep, and then I'm in, and then you scan it again at the elevator, and then again when you go in the studios, and I'm like, man, isn't this ever fucking great?
It was that heroin-like high you were talking about.
Totally was, man. Like I'm thinking like Sweet Jane by the Cowboy Junkies is playing, and Mickey and Mallory and I are holding hands and we're ready to go murder radio.
What a beautiful relapse that was.
Oh, it surely was. I was John Travolta driving down the street in the beautiful Camaro that got keyed, cooking up my rig, I think, which is what they call it, on my spoon, man. And it's still in my veins.
I don't want to go out of order here, but since you mentioned John Travolta, amazing interview you did with him. I've listened to it several times. I love that thing.
I can't believe we got to do that. That came about so suddenly and organically that it was just like the MCA interview I did in Orlando, which is my favorite interview of all time because I love the Beastie Boys. But I'm sorry, I love Beastie Boys. It's not the Beastie Boys. I just committed like the mortal Beastie Boys sin. If there's any message you get from this podcast, don't call them the Beastie Boys. They're Beastie Boys, you fucks, okay?
And watch the doc on Apple TV. Right.
It's brilliant. Although I have a unique observation on that I'll tell you after I answer this question. So my friend Julia comes to me. She's the program director for Magic, and Mike had interviewed Olivia Newton-John that morning, and they were doing that Grease sing-along. And she was like, would you want to talk to John Travolta if I could get him? I'm like, do you know me at all? And she's like, okay, I just want to make sure. Be flexible. It could happen at any time during your show. And I'm like, you know me, I'm gonna roll with the punches. If I have John fucking Travolta on my line, I'm gonna talk to him. Yeah. And so near the end of the show, they were like, okay, after the show, 7:30, he's gonna call this number, blah, blah, blah. And I still couldn't believe it. And then when Senning and I went in the production room and the phone rang and I picked up, it was, when you look at my life as a 50-year-old male, one of my very first machismo role models was Vinnie Barbarino. I mean, you had Arthur Fonzarelli and you had Vinnie Barbarino, and that's who taught you how to be a man. You're like, up your nose with a rubber hose.
I own that box set. I love that.
Welcome Back, Kotter? No shit.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember not to cut you off, but I remember I was traveling. My family's from Jersey. And we were going to visit some family in Jersey. We stopped in like South North Carolina at a Cracker Barrel, and they have the store there. They have some DVDs. Everyone I saw Mork and Mindy. I saw Welcome Back, Kotter, and I was a Grease fan, and I was I got to buy this. And I remember I was I don't know, probably 11, 12 years old at the time, and I had a portable DVD player for the drive to Jersey, and it was season 1 of Welcome Back, Kotter. And I burned through it like up and down both ways.
Shit. How did that land? Like, were you like, did it like all land well with you, or did it feel real dated?
So I don't know if it's because I started acting at 8 years old, and they kind of trained me to enjoy it as much as I can. You know what I mean? Like to find the good in the. So honestly, watching it, I loved every second of it. It didn't feel too old. But my parents had kind of, I had watched Mork and Mindy with my dad. I watched, this isn't quite as it's not from the 70s, but Seinfeld with my grandfather every night when I would be over at my grandparents' house. And I just loved the 70s, 80s, and 90s shows. So watching Welcome Back, Kotter, Horshack was just my favorite. He was just incredible. And then, of course, like you said, Barbarino was just, that's the definition of a man. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh yeah, dude. And Horseshack, actually the first and probably only fan letter I've ever wrote. They had Ron Palillo, the actor who played Horseshack. They had his address in Dynamite magazine that I used to subscribe to, and so I wrote him this fucking letter at like 6, 7 years old. Like, I think you're so funny, and he never responded to it. And so like when I got a little older, I would wish death upon Horseshack, and then he did die.
Okay.
I know. And then I'm like, haha, motherfucker, should have written me back. But like, so Vinny Barbarino then goes on to be fucking Tony Manero in Saturday Night Fever, which I saw way too young because of my grandma. She's so irresponsible. Rest in peace. I love you. But so irresponsibly took us to see that at way
Great
too
movie.
young an age. Oh, such a film. And like, my grandmother lived in Larchmont, New York. So we were going into the city from the time I was 4. And we saw that movie in Larchmont. So like, it hit so well with me in New York City, and like I knew dudes who dressed like that and shit, you know. And so I see that, and then he's Danny Zuko in Grease. I mean, he had so many, and then Bud in Urban Cowboy. So like you can chart your evolution as a man to John Travolta's evolution as an actor, and then like most of us, he disappears after Look Who's Talking. And in your 20s and your late teens, you're usually lost anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was lost for a long time, and so was Travolta doing forgettable movies. And then to experience the comeback in Pulp Fiction, the greatest film of all time, of course.
I was so disappointed. I just moved. I have a Pulp Fiction shirt. I was going to wear it for this, and I can't find it. I was pissed off. I can't find it.
I'm glad it would have, like, if you had found that though, then probably by cosmic fate, I probably would have worn one of my 2 Pulp Fiction shirts, and then we would have looked like a couple of fucking dorks doing a Quentin Tarantino podcast. Like, let's talk about foot fetishes and Uma Thurman. So like getting to talk to Travolta about all of that. Yeah. Like we don't do a lot of interviews only because I can't pretend I'm interested in somebody. And if they come to me and they're like, hey, you know, Birbiglia is coming to Side Splitters, do you want to have him in studio? I'd probably be like, probably a talented guy, probably funny. People love my guest, but no, I'm not going to have the kind of conversation with him that is going to be good for either one of us. I'll promote your gig, no problem, but what are we going to talk about? Right. So that's why I try to only talk to people. Bob Barker, you know, we talk to Martin Short, Travolta. When you get those chances and you can really let them know what they meant to you, most people who are in that field for the right reasons appreciate that. And I could tell immediately that Travolta appreciated where I was coming from. And by the end of it, by the time we had walked through the whole Pulp Fiction, that was so great for me because I got to thank him for giving me the gift of Vincent Vega in that movie, and then B, have him tell me the behind the scenes shit that he shared that I couldn't even, you know, that was great, man. So thank you. That was one of probably my number 2 interview of all time. Although I would say that and Sacha Baron Cohen as Borat are probably tied for number 2. No, I'm going to put Travolta ahead of that. Sacha Baron Cohen at number 3.
So how soon after that interview with John Travolta did you rewatch Pulp Fiction to see it through his eyes? I would have done it as soon as I got home.
Yeah, it was definitely within a couple of weeks. That's one of those films that like I don't ever set out to watch it, but like it just happens to either be on or I'll get in the mood. Or when I was single, some girl that I dated wouldn't have seen it or something. I'm like, well, all right, I need to figure out if we're going to actually, you know, hang out again. So if you could just watch this and tell me what you think, you know, if the response is like, I just don't get it. Like, why are they in those clothes with the weird beach volleyball thing? Okay, well, listen, you take it easy. I'm sure you'll have a good life with some stupid guy who's going to beat you.
Oh God. So back to you coming back to radio in Tampa. You were still living in Orlando, right? When you first came back full time?
Oh man, yeah.
Because that drive's got to be horrendous every day.
So another episode of the universe looking out for me. We could not sell our house, and you know, I didn't know about uprooting my family and bringing them over here because my son at the time was 5, 6 years old maybe, and my wife at the time had a really good job and shit, and so I have one of my best friends was in the Navy forever, just retired, and he had his brother who I knew since he was a little kid, now actually a judge for Pasco County.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, it was such a weird world. And his parents live like within a mile of my house now. But he had an apartment / condo that he had to rent out off of Manhattan by Gandhi. It was super cheap. Like he let me rent that for so ridiculously cheap. And so I would sleep there during the week. But I would go because my son was young and still didn't understand the concept of like, dad's got to go to work in Tampa. And so I would go home literally once and sometimes twice during the week. So that I-4 to Tampa drive is something like, no matter how bad the bridge is on my way home, again, when we used to have traffic, I'm so freaking glad that I don't have to like make that Orlando to Tampa. It's rough when I go see my parents now. They live in Orlando, and every time I have to make the drive, I'm like, oh, this fucking sucks. And then I think to myself, dude, you were making this drive both ways 3, 4, sometimes 5 days a week.
And it's not quite as long of a drive as that. But before going to the hospital full time, I was working. I was a service manager at Sprouts Farmers Market in South Tampa. So I'm driving from Hudson to South Tampa 5 days a week. It was an hour and 10 from where I was living, hour and 15, depending on traffic. And I was over it, and they like to schedule me to close and then be right back at 6 a.m. So I'm out at midnight, back at 6. I just sleep in my car in the parking lot. There's no point in going home at that point.
No.
But so no, that drive mine wasn't as bad as yours, but I didn't love any second of it. No,
and then like when I was doing it, I was doing mornings for 97X. So, I had to be at work at like 3:30. And so, I'd go put my son to bed at like 9:30, 10, drive home, sleep for a little bit, and then the next day, the day after, try to be there when he gets off of school and try to restore some sort of normalcy to his life. So that was a really, really tough year. Yeah. And then finally, by a miracle, we sold our house. Again, not a religious dude, but we took one of those Saint Christopher statues. They tell you to like bury it upside down. Like within 6 hours of me burying it upside down in my front yard, we got an offer on our house and sold it and came over here to freaking beautiful West Chase, Florida.
That's amazing. So how long were you at 97X before the format flipped for the Bone, and you went to middays with the format flip, right?
Yeah, I was actually at both for a while. I did both for a couple of months. It was like a little over a year, and we could kind of feel something was up at 97X. Like we had such a disadvantage because the transmitter was so much smaller than the other stations. Like we don't talk about this a lot, but 97X definitely musically the coolest station I've ever worked for, but like one of the coolest music stations in the country. It is so tragic that station underperforms because everyone with it, Dan Connolly, Jenna, like Sam, Danielle at the time, like the people with that station, and Keith, who started it all in Shark, they are so passionate about all the right things, music and events, and giving like fans the opportunity to interact with artists and stuff. It's so tragic that station underperformed like it did in the ratings. So sooner or later, you're going to have to change things, no matter how understanding your company is. And ours is very understanding. And so I remember like we knew something was up, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, this is great. I get back into radio, and here we go again. Mm-hmm. And then one day Shark said, hey man, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but if we had an FM talk station, would you want to do a show on it? I'm like, you pretty much wouldn't have to pay me any more money. And he was like, wait, what? I said, honestly, like if you let me do FM talk again, because as happy as I was to be back in radio, when your sweet spot is talk radio and you've got to play even 3, 4, 5, 6 songs an hour, fuck, dude, like you're gonna make me sit through the Chili Peppers. Like, look, nothing. I love the Chili Peppers. I've loved them since I was a teenager. But you're gonna make me sit through Zephyr Song, and you're gonna make me sit through Linkin Park, and you're gonna make me sit through Mumford and Motherfucking Sons talking about, well, it's not my fault this time. And I'm going, no, this is great. So that was, you know, and then you try to give a nice little 5, 6, 7 minute burst of content and take calls and shit. And then Shark was like, you know, there's a rumor that they're thinking about taking the bone and, you know, and eliminating the music. I said, honestly, from a listener, that'd be great, because I'm getting a little tired of driving home listening to Cowhead and getting in the flow, listening to him and Galvin in Spanish and Dinah at the time and John Brennan, you know, one of my all-time favorite radio personalities. I have to say it 'cause he's my boss now. And he and I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And so he's like, okay, noted. And then it was a couple of months after that when they said, okay, you know, if we were to give you a show on the bone, you know, what would be your niche, your thing? I'm like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you know, we got Bubba in the morning. We know what he's all about. Khaled in the afternoon. We know what he is about. Billy Madison we'd put on, you know, they do this crazy stuff where they shock nads and all this stuff. And I was like, all right, let me think about that. And so I went home, thought, and I'm like, you know, my sweet spot is really taking kind of controversial takes on current events and really pissing people off and like really luring them in and just beating the fuck out of them. You know, you dangle that bait and then just. So I said, what if we called it like In Your Face with Drew Garabo, and I were like, it's just me versus callers. And like, oh my God, we fucking love it. Fuck yeah. So they gave me 10 to noon, and I would go do my 97X Morning X show from 5:30 until 9:50, like grab another cup of coffee, my second of the day, and then stroll down the hall to the Bone Studio, where it'd just be me and my producer, Dick Raines, the namesake for Give Dick a Rest. And I did both. So it was like, that was like a year and a couple months into 97X. And then they finally said they were going to do the app on 97X where, like, you know, let the listeners control the music. And so they man, again, another testament to the company I work for, COX, which is unlike any radio company I've ever worked for. They found a place for Danielle. They found a place for Seth. They found a place for me. Fish works there now on doing afternoons or mornings on the Eagle. So like once they identify you as a value, they're going to find a place for you. And that's unheard of. Yeah, dude. Yeah. And that's so unheard of in radio. So
I always hear, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. No, I always hear that. I still listen to Billy Madison, and they always talk about it too. Is that, you know, kind of similar to how you got your start. You know, when a format is flipped or a show is out, you're kind of lost. And so that's really amazing that they took care of all of you guys.
It is. And by the way, if Billy had not turned down the job for the Morning X, because they offered it to him, he auditioned. Seth didn't think it went well at all. Like they didn't mesh. He didn't think. And then Billy wanted to bring in his whole crew. He wanted to bring Derek Nard, you know, Chubbs at the time, everybody. Had he taken that gig, I'd probably still be selling season tickets for the Magic.
Really?
Yeah. It was because he turned it down. I didn't know it at the time, but it was because he said, no, I'm going to stay here in San Antonio, that I was able to come back to radio. So, you know, being on the same station was so weird. And I'm still so happy for all those guys. Like Derek is one of my favorite people in or out of radio. Like, what a great dude.
Yeah. You know, it's really interesting to me is that now Nervous Jared is over there. He was
another one of my favorites. Oh yeah.
that when I saw that they announced that, I couldn't have been more excited for him and happy, just because, like I said, I still listen to that show. So it's kind of, now that they're off the bone, it was kind of a little sweet spot to have them together. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know, I definitely know what you mean. Jared, I met Jared, one of the first people I met over here. He was dating Erica at the time, who she still does traffic for us, and she's still one of my favorite people, like among the first people I met. And I always remember those times when I was I'm the new guy, but I'm 40. You know what I mean? Like I got the the new sheen of a kid, yet at the same time I'm some old dude. It's nice to me, you know?
Yeah. So you're being with In Your Face with Drew Garabo, and then when you went to Afternoon Drive, over the years there's been some cast changes. So it always interested me, because I think especially with talk radio, you have to have chemistry with your co-host. So when somebody leaves for various reasons and you have new personalities come in, how hard is it for you as a host to adjust to that?
It's not really that hard. I feel like you could put just about anybody in a room with me, and I can do radio. You know what I mean? Like you could pull in anybody off the street or from wherever, and I can do it. It's just, you need something special if it's going to be sustainable. So like initially, when it was just me and Dick Raines, he had no aspirations of being on the air or anything. He just wanted to screen phone calls. So then they let me have Tuttle, who I knew from Orlando for a while, who's such a unique entity when it comes to radio. Definitely one of the most unique people I've ever met. So I could work with him for a while, and then they gave me Kayla, who came from a top 40 background, and I always felt like that was her sweet spot. So talk radio wasn't necessarily her forte. So I tried to teach her what I could about it. And I think I did, and she was really, really good at it. And then she took the job in in Vegas, which I think about sometimes, and I'm like, man, like I always challenge myself when I look back at like shit that happened. I'm like, how could I have handled this better? You know what I mean? Like I always put it on myself, like no matter how fucked up the situation was, how could I have been a bigger person, and how could I have handled this better? But with her, like we were friends. Like we weren't just like coworkers. Like we were friends. People would start rumors that we had hooked up, but we never eat because I mean, I guess that'll start when like you're eating donuts like together. Like I guess I can understand where people would think that. But we knew the truth, and like it was so ridiculous to us. But like she told me she was going on vacation, and I believed her. And then like like it was yesterday, I remember my girlfriend at the time and I went over to Spanish and Kelly's, and we're sitting down, and Kelly said, did you know that Kayla tried out for a radio show today? And I just look at her, I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, it's on Twitter. I'm like, what? And she showed me this clip, and it was literally Kayla sitting in with these dudes on a morning show. And I'm like, you know, but now I'm like, maybe I could have made her more comfortable to say, hey, I'm going to go try out for a top 20 market, and it's a great opportunity for me. Maybe she didn't feel comfortable sharing that with me, and maybe that's on me. I don't know. So, you know, obviously I was pissed about that for a little bit. Right. But not for the opportunity she had, because that's fucking great. But like,
you're right.
Right. Like if we were just coworkers, no, you didn't owe me shit. But like, because I thought we were friends, that stung for a bit. Totally get it now, and definitely put at least 35% on it, on my inability to be receptive to such things. And then
I do have to say your impersonation of was it Chet Buchanan, was that his name? I never laughed so hard when you would do those impersonations, making fun of, I forget what the radio show was called, but it was hilarious.
Oh, I don't remember it either. Was it I think she's still on it, right? I think it's like the Morning Zoo or something like that. I think it really is like this.
I think so.
The zookeeper or something. So yeah, oh my God, we killed. I'm sure he's the nicest guy in the world, but he was collateral damage because like we just killed him. Poor guy. So, from that, and then Gio was with me when she was with me. And then, man, Gio's such an interesting individual. I was just talking to Sending about him today, like about how unique Gio is. And it was easy to work with him, man. He was just the ultimate straight man. You could bounce anything off him. And then the more you would probe, the more interesting things you would find out about him, why he hated breakfast, like what I still to this day do not know the name of his bird. Like he's got a bird and it's an FSU related name. And that's all I know.
I don't know why I vaguely remember something about him getting drunk, and you guys talking about it on
driveway.
Air.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So two things. Like number one, he would call Seth and me on our fantasy football show, and he would be drinking in his car in his driveway, so he would not have to deal with the family. And then the thing you remember is when he went to Tallahassee. And passed out with his Periscope at the time running. And the dude he was staying with was banging his girlfriend in the bedroom, and Gio was like listening to it, but then passed out. And so like the whole Periscope is this dude banging his girlfriend with Gio passed out.
That's amazing radio.
That was phenomenal. That was such a gift. I thank Gio for giving that to me. And then Senning and I were actually talking about this too. My chronology here is kind of fuzzy because I believe at one time, at the same time in the studio, it was me, Gio, Seth, and soul brother Kevin. I'm almost positive that in the early days, it was that combination of people.
Yeah.
And I will say, when you talk about chemistry, like that's difficult because you have a lot of different voices, mentalities, etc. So as a host, trying to cut through all of that and balance the right amount of everything, that was challenging. And so then Gio like left, and it was me and Kevin and Seth, and then that also presented challenges. They have different approaches to radio. Seth is a very methodical, let's plan a lot. Kevin is a very organic sniper, one of the funniest motherfuckers you're ever going to meet, see, or hear in your life.
I loved him on the Shannon Burke show. He was hysterical. And then, I mean, the magic that you two had together was amazing. I loved every second of you two together.
Yeah, I like being with him. Shannon sucks. There's just no other way for me to say that. Like, I'm sorry. I was trying to find a professional, nice way to dance around that. Not just as a radio personality, but like as a human being. Like just a shitty guy and a shitty radio personality. And the reason
that comes through.
Yeah, it does. Like people can really tell that the forced like bullshit, like shut up, show. Try to forget about the fact that I shut up my wife on the side of the head while trying to shoot her dog. Yeah, you're right. We shouldn't judge you by that, you fucking loser. Anyway, so hearing Kevin with him, I love Kevin so much, and he made that show almost listenable. For me, like I know you liked it and stuff, but for me, I like
Kevin.
Right, me too. And I love Kevin so much that I could almost listen to Shannon because of Kevin. Not quite, but almost. And so when they came to me and they were like, hey, what would you think about blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, well, if anything ever happened, obviously I'd love to work with Kevin. Like I've known him since Real Radio days. Like he's one of the funniest guys I've ever met. So when he came on the show, I still think that probably if I was a better leader and communicator, maybe I could have found a way to make it work with me, Seth and Kevin. I don't know. It was just I wasn't that great at it at the time. And then their differences in approaches and mentalities didn't make it any easier. So that had to change. And he's one of those people who's definitely both skilled at being that funny guy, but also skilled at being a host. So, you know, if you told me right now that I could go on a show and make someone else funny, that would feel weird for me because I feel like I'm a host, and he feels the same way, and he's right. You know what I mean? He's really, really good at it. And so, like, you know, that got pretty behind the scenes, to be honest with you, got pretty bad for a while. That was a lot rougher than we let on, both personally and professionally. And so when he got his own show, and then it was me, Seth, and Senning, you know, that felt at the time that, like, okay, at least we got that figured out, and now we can get on and do what we do. And we did for, you know, 2 years. And then, you know, and then Seth's dissatisfaction with his position in radio in general and at the Bone necessitated a change there. And so that led to what I consider now to be the most genuinely fun, organic, beautiful, magical experience I've ever had, and that's working with John Senning.
Well, one of the reasons I love your show, same reason why I love Billy Madison's show, and honestly, I mean, a lot of the shows at the Bone, and of course Mike Couch's show, you can sense, especially now, a true kinship, and you can tell that you're having fun, and it's not forced, and that's, I think, what makes good radio.
Yeah, I totally agree. You don't have to love each other. You can make radio work if you respect each other.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And for a long time, we made it work. Like me, Seth, and John, we really made it work. And there were moments when it was great, and there were moments when off the air it wasn't so great. But as soon as the microphones go on, you all know that you have to put that bullshit aside and go out there and deliver great shit. But for, like, right now, there is just such this vibe of, I genuinely care for John and he genuinely cares for me. And there's no bullshit. There's no negativity. There's no anything but, like, let's challenge each other to be the best people and radio personalities that we can be. And to be able to work in that environment and hope that people can pick up on that, that's the best thing ever, man. I can't believe that we get to do it. And when Mike is in there on Mondays and Fridays, like, to see her evolution as a person and a radio personality, and to have helped her along that path from where I met her, that's astonishing too. It's great.
I mean, I remember before she was on the show, hearing her on Drew Garabo Uncensored. And I loved her from there. I knew that she'd be great with you guys. Her cackle is infectious. I love it.
Yeah. It's when we had her on the podcast, I didn't know her all that well. I'd worked some events from her. She was one of those people who immediately I'd vibe with her personally, but I didn't know that much about her. I don't follow wrestling, so I wasn't really, I didn't know. I knew the name Mike Rotunda. I'd grown up watching wrestling in the 80s. And so we had a couple of conversations, and she seemed nice, and we were friends. And then when Seth and I had her on that podcast, she blew my mind. Like, to find out that when she was 15, she was like 250 pounds, and she worked her way through that, and see the person that she's become. She's truly something special. Like, she has that thing and I feel really fortunate yet confused that she's still on with us 2 days a week, because I sincerely thought that by now she'd be a global brand, even more than her brother. Like, her brother's tremendously charismatic. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love what he does, and outside the ring, I've seen the entertainment shit that he does, and it's incredible. But, like, she's got that plus that something special. And so, it's fantastic. And her and John both, the Beastie Boys say it in the Beastie Boys story, to be able to go to work with your two best friends, like there's nothing like that. So to be back in radio and then every day to be 5 days a week with this dude who I consider to be the warmest, most genuine, deserving human being I've met. And then Micah on top of that 2 days a week. I just, everything I've experienced so far has led me to this, you know?
Yeah, I've always loved John, even before he was John Senning of Drew Garabo Live, but when he was Promo John. I loved when you guys would bring him in and talk to him. And when I don't even remember how long ago this was, but when he drove Seth over the Skyway, that was just hysterical. Can you tell I listen to your show every day?
Thank you. That's awesome, dude. And honestly, he was there for my first ever Uber ride. Like it was when Uber was first a thing. And we decided I was going to take an Uber ride on the air. So we got Promo John to do it. And we were in the back of a lady's Uber minivan, and she did not want to be on the radio. And so, like, the bit would have died. Like, if it had been anybody else, I would have been smashing the window with my microphone because, like, he wasn't talking to me. And then we go through Starbucks. And the dude wouldn't the fucking kilt-wearing freak wouldn't talk to me at Starbucks. Wouldn't talk to me. And so if it was anybody else, I would have been so mad. But because John was there with me in those early days, with like 4 or 5 years ago, before I even knew him, of course it was going to be this way, you know. And he's a gem. He is a gem.
I think you have a way about you, and just seeing the cast changes throughout the year, I think you have a way about you of making other people better. And as much as I love seeing you, John, and Micah together, you're making them better as time goes on. And I think it's, you know, seeing John host a show in the future is going to be amazing. Seeing Micah become a superstar will be amazing. And I'm sure that they do, but they have to credit it to you.
That's nice of you to say. It is a goal of mine. And as with most things in my life, I learned it from a unfortunate situation in a bad place. My co-host in Orlando, Daniel Dennis, who has a podcast called A Mediocre Time. You should definitely check it out. A Mediocre Time with Tom and Dan. He was my producer, my co-host, my best friend, my John Senning before John Senning was John Senning, except I was in my 20s and so was he. I was really fucking egotistical and irresponsible. I gave no shits, and we didn't know the boundaries between friendship and work. So literally, we were doing nights together, 7 p.m. until 11 p.m. He would come over around 1 or 2. We'd get high and play NFL Blitz until like 6, go up to the station, plan our show from 6 to 6:30, go over and get high at our friend Chris's house till 6:45, come back, do our show. And like, we would be together nonstop. Sometimes after the show, we'd hang out too. And so like, I took him for granted. When he started to get really good, it threatened me at the time. Instead of seeing it as making the show better, I was so stupid, pig-headed, narcissistic, and insecure that I was like, oh my God, all the attention's on him. That threatens me. And so we had a falling out, and he went to work with the Monsters, and we didn't talk for a couple of years. And I think back to that and the missteps that I made. And so, I'd like to both atone for that and help really talented people reach where they want to be. And John is, while he's such a great co-host for me and the beautiful yin to my yang, he's a host. Like when I listen to him on the radio, he has that thing. So I can help him learn from the mistakes that I've made for the next however many years I have with him, and then turn him loose on the radio world and let him be the greatest radio personality of all time.
Yeah. And it's kind of, I don't know if this was a great comparison, but, seeing these different personalities that you've helped groom and cultivate, and, it's kind of, and when seeing them go off and do other things, it's kind of got to be like looking at your son and being proud of your child.
No, it is. That's a great comparison. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's like, I feel like I've served my purpose for their life. I have a thing where I hate being a detriment to people. And there are certainly people in my professional and personal life whose lives were not left better for me, for knowing me. And I hate that. Like, that's my number one pet peeve about myself is not leaving anyone's life better for having met me. And so I want, even with Kayla, like she's been killing it out in Vegas, and no matter how it went down or anything, I'm so happy that she's out there. I'm so proud of what she's doing. And, you know, the same thing with Gio, who's now with Calta, you know, and, you know, and I want everyone who's been working with me to do something better once we're no longer. So, and look at Danielle. I mean, holy shit, like what a radio superstar she is, and crushing it on Magic. So one day Mike is going to do what she's going to do. And, you know, John, who fills in for hosting duties now, I mean, he's doing Roger and JP on Monday with Monica. That's, you know, I'm going to cling on to him for as long as I can, but not at the expense of his own success. Right. You know, once he's ready to start getting Piz aid, because we got him full time, which was nice in December. But once he's ready to start really making radio checks, it's going to be nice to be able to say, like, I had any kind of part in that, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think you've accomplished a lot and have a lot to be proud of in your radio career. So before we wrap it up, I do like to ask if there's any, you know, up and coming people who want to get into radio, and maybe they're discouraged, and maybe they're just not. I'll say this: I applied for promotions at Cox. I got discouraged when I was informed that I wasn't selected for an interview. But you know, there's definitely people who are trying their best to get involved. So what advice, if any, could you give to somebody who may be discouraged?
Yeah, no, that's the right route that you took, and that sucks. That's odd that you wouldn't that wouldn't happen, because we have opportunities there, and that's honestly the best way you can get into it. So if you're looking to do it, I would reapply, because Olivero, who heads up their promotions, is a phenomenal human being. He's a guy who really, truly takes pride in making the people around him better, you know? And there was a while where people in the podcast realm would want you to believe that radio is dying and it's a medium but I mean, right now, especially with what's going on, which we've managed to avoid talking about for the however many 5 hours that we've been talking, you know, that it's vital. Like, people are turning to us more than ever. Like more people are relying upon local live radio. So I think it's going to be something that's vibrant and vital for a long time. I would say apply for promotions jobs. There are no longer internships for whatever reason. Like, you used to be able to not even necessarily get school credit, but like just be an intern and like a show and show up. And now I think like working promotions gigs and just building those relationships, all it takes is you doing either something stupid or something like bizarre or whatever, and then a host like Mike or me or whatever brings you in and does a bit on you, and the next thing you know, you earn the trust of someone like that. And you know, I think Ryan Hoppy is a really good example. I think, you know, he takes a lot of shit, and he's been grinding it out for years and years and years, and he's still tight with all of us. He is beautifully himself, and he's a good example of how you can get a gig in promotions, meet the right people, and get people to, you know, to go towards your podcast. So I would say also do that, like do these things like what you're doing right now. You're putting in the reps. Like that's how you get good at this shit. You've been phenomenal during this conversation. Like
Thank you.
Your pacing has been good. Your questions have been great. Like you're good at what you do. And the more you do that, the even better you're going to be. And so, you know, when you do that shit, people will take notice.
I really appreciate you saying that. Look, talking to you has been absolutely incredible. We met almost a year ago.
Was it?
Well, it was my birthday, so I know the day. You know, you're an ambassador for Busch Gardens, and you were gracious enough to walk me in on my birthday. And that, you know, I remember, you know, even being nervous to just meet you at the park. Just 'cause, like I said, you're iconic to me. So, you know, that was very nice of you to walk me in on my birthday. And I've been grateful. You followed me on Twitter, and we've, you know, communicated back and forth every once in a while. And you know, I'm very grateful for that. So thank you for being who you are. Thank you for hopping on the podcast. You've been incredible, and I really appreciate you.
Dude, thank you. That was a fun day. I used to love back when we got to do stuff. I used to love walking people into Busch Gardens, man. Like I
Yeah.
really, really got off on that to be able to help people who could maybe afford it, but it'd be a pain in the ass. To be able to help them avoid that ticket entry was pretty friggin' sweet, and I loved that, dude. And honestly, it's been a pleasure, man. I wish you're a talented dude, you're a charismatic guy, and that right avenue is going to appear in front of you, man. So keep doing exactly what you're doing and stay positive, man. Don't get discouraged.
Thank you so much, man. And hopefully you come back. There's obviously more to talk about with all your charities and everything. So hopefully you'll come back one day soon.
Absolutely, man. Anytime you want me. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So with that being said, this has been Starving Artist. Drew, thank you. And we'll catch you guys next time.